Capcom have been having a really good track record lately. Resident Evil 2 Remake is currently hot competition for my Game of the Year 2019, and it feels like release after release, their games are getting high praise that feels legitimately deserved. And it's nice to see that Capcom are keeping the quality of their latest titles at a good consistent level. But there is one franchise that's being slept on. I've searched high and low for a rumour of a new game or remake, but as of the release of this video, nothing. Not a whisper on the wind. I feel people need a reminder, something to bring this franchise out of extinction. I'm so sorry, let me have one. So it's about time we touched on my favourite Capcom PS1 game, Dino Crisis 2. Now, I haven't talked about Dino Crisis in 3 years. Jesus Christ. So to boil it down into something which is easy enough to digest, Dino Crisis 1 was Resident Evil with dinosaurs. It was a solid game, but overall, despite being a quality survival horror title, I felt you could easily replace dinosaurs with zombies and you'd have another number on the Resi belt. A mad scientist called Kirk messed around with something called Third Energy, which, instead of creating clean, renewable energy for the world, ruptured time itself and sent dinosaurs stumbling into our timeline. Whoopsie fucking daisy. You spend the game as Regina, chasing down Kirk and trying your best to avoid velociraptors nibbling your bum. Now, as I mentioned, this is a very good survival horror game. It does a lot of things right. The sound effects and music paint a good atmosphere, and the dinosaurs felt legitimately scary, despite being really old birds. But then Dino Crisis 2 came along and was like,
"Welcome to the Thunderdome, you fucking pigeons."
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
all of this happens in under 2 minutes of the game's first cutscene. It wastes absolutely no time informing you that things are going to be much different than Dino Crisis 1. Because that game was going for survival horror, the build up to when you see your first dinosaur was executed almost flawlessly. The shots were created to be scary, with slow panning camera movements and a drawn out reveal for your creature. And I'd say for an early 2000s me who was still having nightmares over the goddamn kitchen segment from Jurassic Park, it did the job pretty well. So the fact that Capcom handed a bunch of potentially traumatized children a very big gun and went, "Get your revenge, kiddo," was extremely cathartic. We learn very early on that Dino Crisis 2 has replaced the genre of survival horror with action adventure, and I personally think this was the best possible move in order to make it stand out or feel different to Resident Evil. But before we start talking about what has changed in terms of gameplay, I first want to introduce the story. How did we end up pissing off this mad lad yet again? Well, thankfully, the game starts off blessedly simple.
Though keep in mind, it starts off.
Essentially, a group of dum-dums were messing around with Dr. Kirk's third energy research and sent a location called Edward City into an unknown time. So, using the same methods, a rescue team is sent to find the survivors, being led by a man named Dylan, whose very hair looks like it came straight out of a Cretaceous period. Working as an advisor to Mr. Just Fuck Me Up fam is Regina, demonstrating how despite coming out just 1 year after Dino Crisis 1, that can be just long enough to vastly improve your FMV models and your general cutscene quality, going from stiff robotic motions to motion capturing actors, allowing for a whole new world of physical expression to open up, and sick side flips. It's not the kind of thing I'd notice initially unless I played them back to back, but the motion capture gives Dino Crisis 2's cutscenes so much more life and energy, whereas Dino Crisis 1's feel about as sterile as its in-game environments, something which Dino Crisis 2 changes drastically from the former. No longer are we stalking the halls of an abandoned, blood-soaked facility, we are instead thrust into the mysterious jungle of an unknown time, with absolutely gorgeous pre-rendered backgrounds that aged like wine. Throw some particle effects in there and it really feels like it's pushing the PS1 to its limits, and that is not a bad thing. So not long after we open the floodgates for an onslaught of do you think Saurus jokes, we have fun here. Regina and Dylan find themselves going their own separate ways in order to find survivors, our red-headed maiden still holding on to her bountiful harvest of leftover sass.
Yeah. That weapon definitely suits a Trat member. See ya, Mr. Barbarian.
So fierce!
We start the game off as Dylan, and we find ourselves swapping between the two protagonists as the story progresses. Keep in mind we're barely at the 5-minute mark and Psycho Helmet over here is ambushed by a pack of velociraptors. You have your gun, now it's time to keep your head, as you paint the jungle red with the cold blood of your enemies. The mayhem that follows is completely glorious, moving from map to map with predetermined camera angles which resets the dinosaurs that are thrown at your face. Your main indication that something will be gunning for you is the distinct sound effect of rustling bushes. Once you hear that, you auto-lock with L1 and give it a well-earned bop. You have a truckload of ammunition, and your main goal is to be the last thing with a heartbeat. The most addictive element of your blood frenzy are the extinction points you get after a kill. These points accumulate and add up to a total once you leave them out proper. The game really pushes you to be fast on your feet though, as going through an area whilst taking no damage can grant you a very generous bonus on top of your max score. Now, since there isn't a bank in sight and you can't exactly exchange your Chuck E. Cheese tokens, your extinction points also serve as currency, which can be used to recharge your ammo, buy medical supplies, and even buy new weapons. Both characters have different main weapons to wield, and whilst Dylan is competent, I've got to admit if I had to choose between this delightful half moon and what is essentially Doom guy with lady parts, I'd go for the latter every single time. Regina is broken and is personally responsible for the extinction of over 70% of a prehistoric period. Backed with heavy artillery and weapons which are not only fast but for some reason deal about as much damage as a shotgun, whenever the game handed control over to her, I was always itching to see what tools of death the shop would gift you next. Now obviously the characters are all well and good, but let's be honest, the real stars of the show are the dinosaurs, and the roster in comparison to one is flourishing. We have a few returning Hall of Famers, such as your standard raptor, pterodactyls, and of course the T-Rex. But on top of that, we have allosaurs, compsognathus, triceratops, inostrancevia, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and oviraptors. Not all of these creatures have good connotations with me, however, the mosasaurs specifically. But that's only because they're put in a section where your movement speed is brought screeching to a halt, and you're also given platforming segments. This, combined with tank controls and a fixed camera, leads to a whole bunch of god fucking damn it, and you aren't helping, young man! Overall, the game aspect of Dino Crisis 2 is unadulterated fun. The controls can sometimes lead to bouts of frustration, and the lock-on can be a little picky before you're vored by Tyrannosaurus Alan. Funkanicity! But all things considered, the fact that they attempted this and it actually came out the way it did is proof that experimentation can sometimes lead to a very fun party. Speaking of which, remember when I spoke about the story and how it starts off comprehensible? Yeah, things kinda take a weird turn. Don't worry though, it's not exactly a negative. I feel if a game focusing around giving dinosaurs a jolly good spanking had a by-the-numbers script, then I'd feel a little cheated. As stated, the game revolves around our two protagonists trying to find survivors. There are obstacles along the way, such as our old one-eyed nemesis, who abandoned the life of being a simple animal hunting for food and instead decided to jump into a life of vengeance and thrill kills. Thankfully, I knew this game was my kind of dumb shit when they introduced the futuristic bikers launching Beyblades which explode on impact, and that is only the beginning. So Regina, thinking that the Power Rangers are some of the city's survivors, rescues one of them before she turns into delicious strawberry jam. She removes the helmet and, oh, you're a strange dinosaur. She then proceeds to escort this violent, mute young woman and chains her to a pipe, despite the abundance of creatures that crave to gnaw into your lower intestines for her own safety. I get the feeling that Regina would not leave the car window open for her growing child. Eventually, after rescuing dumb Dylan, who got trapped in a small room like an actual preschooler, they take the mysterious woman back to their ship, only to find out that something has destroyed the interior, including the mechanism that will allow them to return to their own time. So, the duo go their own separate ways yet again in order to find spare parts for the ship and an alternate method of time travel, which must exist due to the entire incident surrounding the city. However, before Dylan can set off, he's momentarily distracted, as our Jane Doe has noticed something about him that's a little peculiar.
Bruh, look at this dude. Wait till you see the... No. Look at the top of his head.
Not much really happens on Dylan's big adventure. He happens upon some oviraptors and has to chase this little bastard down the dirty facility halls. But he eventually finds the parts he needs and returns to the ship, only to find that the girl is missing. He then, out of nowhere, decides to say this.
Well, I was thinking, maybe she's not one of the survivors at all. What if those helmet people are from a completely different time than ours?
What?
What?
Never mind.
Did you read the script?
Shortly after, a bunch of long-necked pricks start chasing you down like a bunch of London lads you accidentally bumped into at 2 AM. This entire segment is actually really cool, and it's not the only time they throw in these mini-games to make sure that gameplay isn't entirely composed of running and gunning. It would have been pretty neat to have access to an arcade version of these in New Game Plus, but sadly it wasn't meant to be. As they progress, we get a call from a man called David, a weird character who kinda pops up to piss off the T-Rex, then rejoins the party later after nuking a bunch of raptors from orbit. This also brings us to the shocking realization that apparently every single resident of Edward City has been slaughtered, the dinosaurs sticking to their Dino Crisis 1 roots of being bloodthirsty killers instead of animals that eat to survive. But despite failing their original mission, they still need to gather Kirk's research on third energy and find a way home. Of course, a whole bunch of shenanigans occur before Dylan runs into more trouble with the Power Rangers, but he's saved by an intervening acquaintance who risks her life to save his, as she flees, dropping a necklace that Dylan recognizes as his sister's. Ooh, the story only gets weirder from here on out, and I cannot wait until we reach the climax. It is so dumb, I am shivering with anticipation. The group, now a trio, split up again for gameplay purposes, causing Regina to encounter the absolute chonker, who she greets like a creepy admirer than an intimidating threat.
You again? Persistent thing, aren't you?
But when I was listing off the dinosaurs, I may have forgotten just one.
Greetings, friends. I smelled McNuggets.
Big boy out of goddamn nowhere. Yeah, this guy kinda creeps up on the story. The introduction of the Gigantosaurus is meant to be the one up to the T-Rex, evidenced by the fact that he ate his expensive Samsung camera in one swift gulp. As random as its appearance is, I like the fact that it serves as a final boss for the two characters. Regina's boss fight with it, I'd argue, isn't really a boss, and more of a frantic dash from side to side with his big walking steak as a tasty medium rare. Dylan's shot at taking down the beast comes later, but before that they need to continue on their adventure to find a way home.
Whoa! Let the men handle this.
Well, please, by all means, it looks like you know what you're doing. Ah, you bloody plum.
So now that David has been num-nummed, oh what's this, I can now address the big story twist that bursts in like Sylvando's fucking parade. Dylan floats down the stream only to be found by our strange mute friend. She takes us into a facility and begins to play a pre-recorded holographic video. And oh boy, this is where things get Now, I will be explaining this in baby boy terms, but trust me, this is better for me and you. The man on the recording begins to speak to Dylan specifically, telling him that he's from 2055. He was attempting something called the Noah's Ark plan, due to the rips in space-time that the third energy reactor created. These rips in space-time were causing moments in history as early as the Cretaceous period to get all messed up, and affect the Cenozoic ecosystem. This would change the evolutionary patterns of humans and would wipe them out from existence. So in order to stop this, they transported a number of dinosaurs from that time period using third energy technology and put them 3 million years into our future with the plans to put them back into their own time once the issues had been resolved. Meaning that the areas we've been exploring are 3 million years ahead of the year 2010. However, the gate that was used to bring the Noah's Ark team forward suddenly shut down with no immediate signs of repair, meaning that they were stuck in this timeline. And slowly, the dinosaurs began waking up from their cryogenic sleep, and disaster inevitably followed. So this man placed the weak and vulnerable children that the Noah's Ark team brought along with them for some god knows reason, inside the pods that kept the dinosaurs, which would heal their wounds and teach them valuable information as they slept. Issue is that these were made for dinosaurs, so they lost their ability to speak and instead held a passionate need to protect the dinosaurs from harm, which is why they attacked us throughout the game. Also, this young woman is named Paula, who is not only the daughter of this man, but was placed in a pod to heal alongside the other kids. The man then reveals himself to be none other than Dylan fucking Morton, 45 years into the future, which means that Paula is actually Dylan's daughter, which is why she found his face so incredibly fascinating. Oh my god, I'm done. feel like my head's filled with fluid. Gonna live as a wood nymph now. This is my new calling in life. So with that bombshell out of the way, Dylan and Paula make their way to the one-use-only teleporter which future Dylan happened to shed light on. However, this cheeky sod slapped the self-destruct button, and this young man makes his second appearance, with some music which unsettled me for some reason. It sounds like a combination of 80s horror and Final Fantasy VII. With the assistance of Bahamut's Mega Flare, the Gigantosaurus is turned into the after effects of a spicy curry, and we have mere minutes to go before the facility is blown to Kingdom Come. Regina appears because the script demanded it, and it appears the little bastard isn't too happy with the death count and traps Paula, crushing her legs before she can escape. Because Dylan now knows that this is his future daughter, he offers to stay behind so she doesn't die alone, requesting that Regina takes the third energy research and uses it to find a way to teleport back and rescue them from their fate. She agrees and hops off to safety, as we see Dylan and Paula come to a brutally depressing end which left an everlasting scar on my young, malleable mind.
Daddy.
Well, that's the end. Go home, everybody. Dylan gets a sweet car though, so I guess he's okay. And that pretty much ends my video on Dino Crisis 2. I'm so happy to have finally got my thoughts out there and talk about something from the Capcom library that means a lot to me. It's a very short title to play, which makes it perfect for replay value, and whilst I have a few gripes such as the controls feeling a little wonky at points, and the padding that occurs on a couple of occasions, it is still such a fun experience from beginning to end, story and all. It's so stupid and it takes itself so seriously, but that just adds a whole new level of charm for me. Seeing Regina back in the driver's seat and being just as badass as I remember, and Dylan's weird adventure into having a daughter who's a few years younger than him at best, it's highly memorable for being so out there. And the improvements made to the cutscenes make these low poly models age so much better than the first game's awkward and janky movements. Don't sleep on this title. It's available on PSN for Americans, at least if you own a PS3 or Vita. And luckily for those of you living in Europe, physical copies are still fairly cheap if you want to go out of your way to buy it second hand. I really hope Capcom see the brimming potential of this series and give us an HD remake of the first two games, which would hopefully match the quality of the Resident Evil 1 and 2 remakes. I think that would make my entire year. Dino Crisis 2 is a must-have, and I hope that after watching this video, you can at least consider adding this amazing game to your collections. I don't know how to end this video, so I'm gonna go back to the woods for a bit.
See you later, fam.
So there we have it. Such a long time coming, but I'm glad it's finally out there. Holy moly. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already and you liked what you saw. Share it around to your friends or even grandma if she's into that kind of stuff. Every little helps. I have a Patreon if you really liked the video. The link to that can be found right at the top of the description. I'm now doing vlogs and you can get early access to the podcast which comes out every month. So go and pledge if you want to join the juicy names scrolling by on the right. I still can't get over the generosity of my current patrons. It absolutely blows my mind in the best way possible. Thank you all so much. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you want to go and see other Capcom related content, then The Spear Hunter is definitely your best bet. I'll post a link to their channel in the description, so please go and check them out if you haven't already. Thanks once again, and I'll see you all in the next video.